Support for Consider This is provided by
There's a new place for senior care with daily laundry service. A place with a day spa. A place where seniors get the care they need in the comfort of home. Home Instead Senior Care.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
I realized the value of me telling my story at this age, at this stage, because if someone had been there when I first came forward, if groups like what I belong to now had existed, it just would have made it a lot easier to know that I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only person that was going through this.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, child sexual abuse. Here to talk more about it are Molly Keene, Deputy County Attorney for Douglas County, Sergeant Marlene Novotny, Special Victims Unit, Child Victims. Okay. I wondered, I saw it out of the corner of my eye and I thought, holy smacks, we went to Marlene really fast. It was like, whoosh. We usually.
Support for Consider This is provided by
There's a new place for senior care with daily laundry service. A place with a day spa. A place where seniors get the care they need in the comfort of home. Home Instead Senior Care.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
I realized the value of me telling my story at this age, at this stage, because if someone had been there when I first came forward, if groups like what I belong to now had existed, it just would have made it a lot easier to know that I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only person that was going through this.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, child sexual abuse. Here to talk more about it are Molly Keene, Deputy County Attorney for Douglas County, Sergeant Marlene Novotny, Special Victims Unit, Child Victims Squad at the Omaha Police Department, and Jackie Simmons. Jackie is an Advocacy Program Manager for Project Harmony, Omaha. Welcome to all of you and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Molly, we're going to start with you. How does Nebraska define child abuse?
In Nebraska, child abuse is its own crime. It's statutorily defined as placing a child in a situation that endangers their physical or mental health, placing them in a situation that exposes them to sexual victimization or exploitation. Sexual abuse of a child, however, is defined separately from that under its own statutory construction.
Okay, and talk about that a little bit in terms of the definition.
Okay. First-degree sexual assault on a child is when a perpetrator subjects a child to sexual penetration. That is an age-based crime. So it applies when a suspect is 19 or older and a child is under 12 years of age. That makes it a Class 1B felony, which exposes them to 20 years to life in prison. It is also enhanced when a perpetrator is 25 years or older and a child is between 12 and 16, and then they face those same penalties. There's also first-degree sexual assault, which has an age-based component when a perpetrator is 19 or older and the victim is between 12 and 16 years of age.
Okay, and in terms of numbers, always tough to track. How do we do that in Nebraska? What can you tell us?
I can't speak to the numbers overall in Nebraska, but I can tell you in Douglas County what we do. We have a team of specialized prosecutors who handle these cases. We handle all crimes involving child victims or crimes that are sexually based, so sexual assaults of adults as well. We currently have about 225 of those cases pending right now, and I think 176 of those are sexually based offenses. The vast majority of those are against children.
Jackie, if you would, put faces to some of these numbers. Who are these kids?
You know, they can be anybody's kids. There's nothing that defines or determines who ends up being a victim of sexual abuse. We do know that kids are in more at-risk categories. Children who are pre-verbal or non-verbal because of developmental disabilities are good targets. Children who are glued to devices and spend a lot of time there have an increased risk of meeting people that might harm them. We also know that children who don't have somebody keeping track of where they are during the day and keeping track of who's around them, and maybe adults who aren't making good choices for themselves, who are exposing their children to people that might hurt them.
Okay, and Marlene, the perpetrators then?
In the child sexual assault cases, the vast majority of them are known to the child. I think obviously the children come into us when they feel safe to report. And we find out during interviews that it's someone they know and can name.
So when we think about this, there's probably no generality here, but in terms of how this stuff plays out, what can you tell us from your vantage point there?
As far as when it comes in or how it comes in?
The whole unfolding of all of this, the perpetrators, the victims, how does it generally play out?
Generally, we have learned that there's a grooming process that occurs around children, and that's simply a process of an adult or a perpetrator getting to know the child and getting them comfortable and erasing some of the boundaries that are there with children to the point where they're comfortable making advances where they normally wouldn't. And then that child sometimes not even realizing what has occurred to them because of this grooming that's occurred.
So, okay, Jackie, then how do you distinguish, if someone is just trying to cultivate a relationship, be nice to somebody, where do we on the outside, looking in, when do we know? I mean, it's time to step in here. This just isn't right. There's something odd about this.
Sometimes you never know. Sometimes you have to look at the adult's behavior, and if you have an adult who's spending too much individual time with a child with nobody else around, that's time for alarm and to be asking lots of questions. If you have children who then are starting to act out, maybe they were good kids and all of a sudden they're non-compliant, they're not doing well in school, they may be depressed, it may be time to be asking them other questions because something's going on with them. We can't assume it's sexual abuse because some kids don't have any symptoms at all. But to be asking questions and educating children on what their rights are is important.
Okay, and Marlene, at what point are the police generally brought in, the authorities generally brought into a situation?
Usually it's a child disclosure, and the child disclosure can come to a family member, a friend at school, a school staff member. They come into the hospitals. Anybody that's typically a mandatory reporter will contact police, and that's generally how they come into us.
So talk to us about mandatory reporters. Who are those people?
Those are the people that I think essentially everybody's a mandatory reporter, meaning if you suspect that a child's being abused, report to the police or to CPS, the hotline. But your hospitals, your teachers, your daycares, churches, those are the mandatory reporters that we typically see.
So when you are invited into these situations and you need to become a part of what's happening, it's kind of an interesting place to be, right? For you to be meeting someone in that type of a situation. Talk to me a little bit about why you got into what you do and what your day-to-day really involves.
The day-to-day is taking a large volume of calls and documenting and reporting. We investigate all our reports that come in. If my child that is called in or reported or disclosed is not safe going home, the child comes immediately to Project Harmony. So it's always a safety evaluation. How safe is that child in the environment that they've just told us about?
Yeah, and you mentioned you walk into a lot of different environments. I mean, again, happening everywhere. Is there one common protocol that you have from where you sit? In other words, you've not been in this situation, you're going in, you're kind of not flying blind, but every situation is different, right? So walk us through that protocol, what you are able to do, but what you're not able to do, and then take us from there.
So if a call comes in, say from a school, which is a lot of calls we get in the afternoon, is a child suddenly doesn't want to go home at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon and goes up to a trusted teacher, counselor, and says somebody, dad or mom's boyfriend or someone in the house is hurting them. Our SROs, school resource officers, or the school contacts law enforcement, and a law enforcement officer will show up and they will talk to the counselor or the teacher or even the child a little bit to find out what's going on. The protocol is to call our unit. We're specialized.
Yeah.
I ask a couple questions. When did this occur? Is it going to occur tonight if they go home? There's a lot of ways we try to decide if they're going to be safe or not. But in an instant like I just gave, that's a child who suddenly either doesn't want to return and is brave enough and has come forward to finally tell their story. We'll bring them in, and they're transported by law enforcement, and then they're brought into Project Harmony.
Yeah, because, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say at Project Harmony they have a very useful and helpful program. They have specially trained forensic interviewers who will then conduct the interview of the child in a very non-suggestive way to make sure that they get the most accurate information they can about what's been happening. So the police officers themselves aren't generally conducting the interviews with the child. A forensic interviewer does that, and then the police follow up on those investigations.
Okay, so a good time then, Jackie, to tell us a little bit more about Project Harmony. When did it start, and what is your mission?
Project Harmony has been around for over 20 years now. The CAC movement started about 5 years before that across the nation, 5 to 10 years. And our mission is just caring for kids. We started out as just forensic interviews and advocacy, where we were just helping with the investigation. We've gone way beyond that, as the national model has. So yes, children who have been sexually abused, or allegations of sexual abuse, serious physical abuse, domestic violence, serious neglect that causes injury, those kids all come to Project Harmony for forensic interviews. And while the kids are being interviewed, our advocates meet with the parents to make sure that they can get set up with whatever mental health needs they need. Because we know that kids who have been abused, whether it's sexual abuse or not, struggle. They have problems over the years unless they can get the mental health treatment that they need. So the advocates help the parents to overcome any barriers to getting them to therapy, and then we have mental health staff on staff that they can see on an ongoing basis to treat the children and the parents.
That sounds like a very good protocol and a good system that's set up. One of my great sadnesses as I was researching a bit for this program was just knowing how many kids don't want to talk about it. I mean, Marlene goes into a situation and you finally have a child who's, courageous enough to step up and say something, but that's not always the case, right? So, Jackie, what do you find once you finally get them in there? Why were they so reluctant to talk to begin with?
There's lots of reasons that kids don't talk. It might have to do simply with their own embarrassment. They feel embarrassment, they feel shame for what happened, they blame themselves oftentimes. Sometimes their offender blames them, and so they incorporate that. Sometimes they're protecting other family members, because as Marlene said, most of the people that abuse these kids are known to them. Over 90% of the abusers are known to the children. And so it may be a family member or a respected member of their church or community that they don't know if they're going to feel believed, if people will believe them, or if they'll believe the other person. They don't want to hurt their other parent if it happens to be their partner. There's a lot of reasons.
Wow. And then you find out, as we saw in the opening video, sometimes it takes decades.
Yes.
Right? Is there a common trigger, Jackie, that decades later, after this has happened to them, that they wake up one day and they think, today is the day? Is there something in their life as an adult that happens, have you found, or is it just where they are in their journeys and finding that courage that Marlene talked about later in life?
Some of that is permission to talk about it. So even the kids in school, they're asked. These prevention programs that go into school give the children opportunities to talk about it and permission to talk about it. And sometimes as adults, that's what we need too. We may keep it to ourselves until, say, a parent is sitting with one of our advocates about their own child's abuse, and then that's the first time they talk about it. Or they've gotten into therapy because of something else, maybe a divorce, and then their therapist is asking them questions about their past and they're willing to share it. Or as in the priest issues that are going on now, people are talking about it. It's coming out. So they have permission maybe 30 years later to talk about something that happened years ago.
Okay, so when the therapists are talking with them and getting them to open up about those journeys, what are you finding? So from the time that they were abused to the time that they are finally able to talk about it, what's going on in their lives? Those stories that those therapists are hearing, I mean, what's transpired for many of those kids?
A lot of times those problems that started in childhood continue. They get into substances, drugs, alcohol, they start using those. They can't fight it because the issue that they're trying to escape from has never been dealt with. Mental health issues, the depression that comes with that. So they may get some medication, but again, the underlying issue is never addressed, and so it gets worse. It can lead into criminal behaviors if they're supporting a drug habit. There are lots of things that can continue to cause problems. Some have a lot less problems, but they might not be able to maintain a relationship. So they end up in therapy because of a divorce that really happened because of the trust issues that they have now because of the abuse when they're children.
So Marlene, you're probably seeing some of that, experiencing some of that when folks do get older and they are prone to maybe go into some of the things that Jackie's talking about. Tell us about that from your...
Well, even the teens that we are seeing, you're seeing self-destructive behaviors, you're seeing suicides, you're seeing runaways. And our runaways are at high risk for being abused, sexually abused, even out on the street. But you'll find they're running away from abuse at home. And those relationships never, those children that are abused when they're younger, they never really learn how to be in a relationship. And you're seeing a lot of domestic violence then, and the cycle kind of repeats itself. And that's what we're seeing in some of our cases.
Well, in the spirit of prevention here, we want to put up, starting with the warning signs, and then we're going to work our way through. So I want to put these warning signs up for our viewers, and I'll ask of Jackie to kind of walk us through, but Marlene and Molly, please chime in. So,
when we talk about physical signs, one of the things we want to keep in mind is that if we do medical exams on most of the kids that come through Project Harmony as well, and it's not because we think we're going to find a torn hymen or anything like that. We do it to give reassurance to the children and the parents that the children's bodies are okay and that there's nothing wrong with them and that nobody's ever going to be able to look at them and know that this happened to them. But it's the emotional and the behavioral things that you might see more of. That again, they start acting out, they start doing poorly in school or skipping school or running from home. Sexual behavior does tend to increase. They learn that that's how they can get attention is through sexual behavior, and it's conditioned. It isn't like they're doing it on purpose. It just naturally happens, and that puts them at greater risk. For younger kids, the use of language that's not age appropriate regarding sexual matters is a real red flag. That's something to really watch for. If your child comes home and starts talking about doing things, or you find your child doing things that a child that age wouldn't know, pay attention to that, ask about it. And be educating your child all along about boundary issues, who has permission to look at and touch what.
And as Jackie said earlier in the program, there's also times when there's no signs whatsoever. So there's going to be instances, don't think that, well, I've never noticed anything change in my child, so it couldn't be true. That's not necessarily the case. Some kids act in ways that you wouldn't expect. and that's perfectly normal as well.
And I think we get that the danger here is, for those people on the outside looking in, everybody's busy, right? And I think there's a tendency to think the best of a situation, that's probably just nothing, right? This is probably just a weird day. So Jackie, for those professionals, those family members, those people who are concerned and they're seeing those differences, this is a tough topic to talk about. I mean, with adults, let alone to be addressing this with children. So if someone who's watching is thinking, I may know of a child in this situation, what do they do? How do they even open that dialogue? And with whom do they do that?
If it's not your child, you certainly would want to have a conversation with the parent of that child to make sure that you have permission to talk to them. But then you make it very generic and very you don't make it a big deal at all. It's, we just want to cover boundary issues, and we want to make sure that you know that if anybody's touching you in a way that you don't like, to talk about it. And then that starts the conversation, and then we really don't want people to ask a whole lot of questions, but if they say just yes, then say, tell me who and tell me what. Okay. And then once you have enough information to know that there's something there, you make a report. Okay.
Marlene, I want to ask this of you with everything we've been discussing. Objectively speaking, based on where you've been, does the punishment fit the crime here?
Not always.
Okay.
Not always.
That's fair. But when you're saying not always, I'm sure there's something going on up here. So what is that?
Well, each case is different on its own, and when it gets to the court proceeding, which is I think what we're talking about here, and the punishment phase comes in, there's a lot of things that enter into that. There's still a lot of, it's hard, once you go through, you become a little bit protective of that child that you're investigating with, and you become essentially a team behind that child, and then to go into court and sit, and sometimes the victim is kind of demonized and it's a child, or they're put up in front of their offenders, and I know it's limited, but it occasionally happens. But we constantly, law enforcement constantly has conversation with our county attorneys, and we bring in as much as we can, as much information as we can, so that they're aware of exactly what occurred in these crimes.
Molly, what are we going to see? What do we hope to see moving forward in the system, right, to impact some change for the better for these kids?
Well, I think potentially there could be some statutory changes. Nebraska currently doesn't have a statute regarding authority figures, for example. So once a child reaches the age of consent, which is 16 in Nebraska, there is oftentimes not a criminal statute that fits a situation involving a coach or a teacher or clergy, someone like that. And a lot of states do have statutes that cover that behavior up to a greater age that I think would be appropriate here. Okay. There are also, we've talked about first-degree sexual assault, penetration charges. There's also a lot of touching, which is third-degree sexual assault on a child that occurs, and our statutes on that offense can be difficult to charge. I would think that a potential statute that other states do, some states do have, it would cover ongoing abuse of children, because once something starts happening, it's difficult for children to delineate it happened, on this day and that day and that day. That's not how our minds work, even as adults, let alone expecting a child to describe behavior like that. So I think that an increased penalty for ongoing offenses could be appropriate and helpful in getting greater sentences for some of these offenses.
Okay, thank you. And Jackie, I guess finally here, after hearing all of this, we likely have viewers saying, okay, so what can we do? What can communities do to come together and help protect our children? We want to put up a graphic, and we just ask that you walk us through that and add as you need to there.
Well, learn the facts. It's important that everybody know that sexual abuse is unfortunately a common occurrence, and that it is most often somebody that the child knows. And just knowing that then it allows you to minimize the opportunity. Again, to make sure that parents aren't allowing kids to be one-on-one with other people. And I know that we like to promote mentors and things like that, but you have to be cautious about that at the same time. That if a child is spending an exorbitant, especially amount of time with somebody, or there's lots of gifts and favors and things involved in that, you probably should be paying more attention to that. And then make sure you're talking to the child. We've found that kids don't disclose to parents very often, but the more open the relationship is and the more a parent doesn't badger them about it, doesn't scare them with their questioning, but to continue to have the conversation with the child that I believe you and I trust you and I want to hear from you if anybody's hurting you. And then pay attention to the signs. If your child does all of a sudden change behavior or are starting down a bad path, it may happen slowly at first where all of a sudden they're doing more poorly in school. Pay attention to that. Be talking to your child. Talk to other people about that. Talk to a professional. Get them in therapy, because maybe they won't disclose to you, but they'll disclose to somebody else. Always give children an opportunity to talk to somebody else, whether it's a school counselor, teacher, anybody. And then react responsibly. We don't want anybody, sometimes parents, especially, well, can go overboard with their reaction. They cry and they're calling everybody and they're threatening to kill people, and that doesn't help. It doesn't help the child at all, because especially if it's somebody they know, they don't want that person to be hurt. They want everybody to be okay. They don't want to see their own parent being that upset. They don't want to see anything serious happen to the perpetrator usually, especially not death. And so just making sure that they are level-headedly notifying the right people, getting their child the right help.
Okay, and in the minute we have remaining, we have a poster that you submitted to us, and we want to put that up too now so our viewers can see that. Tell us about this poster, Jackie.
This is our Loud as a Lion, and we recognize that kids don't have the biggest voice in the community, but this is a poster that you can order or download through the Project Harmony website that just gives them some permission to let people know if something isn't going right with them. It lets them know that parents or adults have rules too, and that children can tell if something's happening, and that we want them to tell us if something's happening to them.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, and we have websites that we want to put up for our viewers as well, and I know Project Harmony is on top of those websites, so we'll put those up for our viewers now. We have projectharmony.com, dhhs.ne.gov, L.org, that's darkness to light, and then AmericanSPCC.org, American Society for the Positive Care of Children. Ladies, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. We wish you well. Please keep doing everything that you are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank our students for working so hard behind the scenes, and of course our viewers for watching. As we close, a look at Exarban Village in Omaha, as seen through the lens of James Garvey, a junior here at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402 554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu. Support for Consider This is provided by
There's a new place for senior care, a place with flexible meal plans and 24-hour room service. A place where seniors get the care they need in the comfort of home. Home Instead Senior Care.